Hello, and welcome to another episode of Solipsist Watched. I'm your host, the Social Solipsist, and this week I watched Trollhunter from 2010. I actually didn't realize this movie was this old until I finally got around to watching it. It's been in my collection for quite a while, and I just haven't gotten around to it. So I'm glad I finally did. It is a Norwegian film. It's shot and directed and everything. It's all Norwegian. It's delivered in Norwegian, and it is very Nordic feeling in its tone. It's a little bit questionable whether this would be considered a horror film, as we are still in the month of October, and that's what I'm going with. But I think there's enough elements that I would still call it somewhat of a horror film. It is filmed in found footage style, which I have certain feelings about that we'll get to if you're not already familiar with my feelings on that. And it is, I would call it a mockumentary. It is simultaneously sort of a spiritual successor to things like Blair Witch, but also a successor to things like This Is Spinal Tap. It is more humorous than it is horrific, I would say. And it is absolutely dry as a bone in its comedy. I really, really enjoy it. It's it's a kind of comedy that is not uncommon, but even compared to like British dry comedy, this is played extremely flat. And I really enjoy them going full on with that style, especially because they still thematically are incorporating like sort of dark fantasy horror and these other elements where you really end up flip-flopping between the sort of personal, like very intimate personal elements that are very rooted in like realism, and all the way to the fantastical, in a matter of moments. I have a personal love as well for any time, well, not any time, good executions of reinterpretations of mythology and legends and all these other things. So I do want to specifically call it out as I really appreciate what they did to take sort of the elements of troll mythology in Nordic countries specifically, and like reinterpret that a lot of it in sometimes very literal, sometimes metaphorical ways, and to use it to build their world. It's also a really good way of avoiding, excessive exposition. Is to couch your new, dramatically different reality in sort of cultural knowledge, especially for something that's might be learned by by kids, which is something they actually touch on directly in the film itself. So I think it's super. I think there's a lot to really appreciate about just the way they incorporated the realistic and the fantastical. As far as the cinematography goes, As far as the visuals go in general, I really am not a fan of um, the found footage style. I think even when it is executed well, it's usually not the best option available. And ultimately, that's down to cost, right? It's really easy to make a found footage film because you don't have to. It's essentially lampshading bad cinematography or inexpensive production value by virtue of just saying, hey, this isn't made by professionals, and so we're not gonna even pretend like this is high grade movie production. It's not to say that it never works. Uh, I think Cloverfield does it decently. Um, this film has it doesn't do it terribly. There's a lot of stuff that still looks pretty good, but ultimately it's the combination of a lot of sort of shaky cam footage, which is just naturally not that pleasant to look at, and some very heavy editing that doesn't really necessarily make sense in terms of the conceit of the film at the beginning as to like how the footage was found. Um, the amount of cutting that is done is just excessive, and while that was probably down to like shooting a lot of stuff and finding it in the edit, not having more scenes that are uninterrupted, especially when you're doing found footage where that like uninterrupted scenes seems like it ought to make more sense for the context in which the film is, filmed. Not having that stuff is sort of a disappointment. But that said, that's not to say that they didn't spend any time or effort on the production values. This is not this film, for better or for worse, does not shy away from showing you the actual the troll or trolls. Minor spoilers there. There's more than one troll, I guess. But the uh, it it shows them very openly, which is shocking, actually. The budget's pretty low. It's not like insanely low. I think it's what is it here? 3.5 million. It says, but the effects that they use, both practical props and CGI, they're not incredible. They're not like really, really noteworthy as a standout, but they are very competent. And even if your brain says, well, I know that's CG, it's still in the level of the fantastical where, despite that, it's very easy for me to say it's CG, but I don't really care. The absurdity of the whole situation of the film, the fantastical elements, really mean that I think you can get away with a lot in terms of lowering production value and having it still work, and not sabotaged by seeing jank, which is often a problem with with horror movies in particular. I've spoken before about how showing your monster in a monster game or a monster movie is a really good way to ruin it by sort of devaluing the reveal by not letting tension build. Obviously, that's also less of a problem here because it has less to do with the horror of finding out that there are trolls, but and more to do with the like interactions with them, and so a lot of the the tension in the film is not based on the typical horror stuff of being like an unknown danger or something like that. It's about, a lot of it comes down to it being a somewhat known danger, where you see it's the threat of overt power, and you know, it's the fear of seeing wild animals that you know could kill you if they wanted to. That sort of thing, which is a very different kind of horror or fear. But I still think it works well towards building tension in various scenes and adding stakes to all of the things that go on throughout the film. As I've mentioned before, don't speak Norwegian, just like I don't speak a whole bunch of the other languages. If you haven't noticed, this whole month's foreign language films. So I don't speak Norwegian. I don't really know how good the translation is and the subtitles. I did get the impression that some of the subtlety is being lost because there are certain subtitles that they just didn't translate in terms of like back and forth interjections are missed and those sorts of things. But the actors themselves do an excellent job of playing their various roles. They're all very believable as the kind of character archetypes they're meant to be. Nobody seems out of place. Everybody is sort of there's a lot of storytelling that's done in the acting itself that's less about learning who the characters are and more about watching how they behave in various situations. And I think everybody does a really admirable job of kind of making a compelling dynamic between the various characters. Overall, I sort of wish that it wasn't a found footage film, or that they had been a little bit more deliberate in their editing of it to, lean into that a bit more to let scenes have additional tension. Apparently there was, I had almost forgotten actually that there was supposed to be an American remake of this, which thankfully has been canned. Not even in theoretical production. So yeah, a movie that I don't think adapted directly to like an American audience would work all that well. Just wouldn't be, it's like so couched in like a specific cultural worldview that it's not that it couldn't work, but why would you? I think the film overall works pretty well. It's not like really crazy impressive in any particular way, but as like even as a found footage film, it's a bit of a breath of fresh air, because it does something different, as actually have all the other films this past month so far. So yeah, it's sort of nice to see what people do with low budgets and culturally specific choices and these other things. Anyway, yeah, I recommend it. It's a good like hour and 40 minutes just to hang out and watch something a bit fun. And yeah, I would give it a recommendation despite my personal feelings on some of its shortcomings. Yeah. Thank you guys for watching another episode of Solipsist Watched. I've been the Social Solipsist, and I'll see you guys for Halloween next time.